Hi folks, the question on this round of the Dark Wheel is, would the Christian afterlife be one that you would like to go to? The Dark Wheel is at thedarkwheel.wordpress.com, where you'll find other video makers discussing this same question, so please go check that out. Now, let's try to take this question in the best possible light, because it's very easy to make fun of it and to say that going to heaven would kind of be like being in church forever, because it's about praising God, right? But let's try to think of this in a much more positive light, because I have experience of being a Christian and of thinking of the idea of heaven as something much more sublime than sitting in church singing really boring hymns. So we don't know much about heaven except in abstract terms, but Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise." So whatever heaven is, it's paradise. So maybe think of it like, imagine your best memories, your most joyful memories. So it's going to be like that, only forever, not fleeting, but for all eternity. So the question is, would you like that to happen when you die? That's like the best day of your life forever. So my instant sort of gut reaction to that is, yes, I want that. That's preferable to anything. But when you really think about it, it takes on quite a different hue. Ken McNutt in his video made a very relevant point, which was that we only understand what bliss is when we have the experience of its opposite. So if there were only bliss, if there were no other state of existence, bliss wouldn't actually be a feeling, because it's only a feeling when it's contrasted to suffering. So let me try to pull this down to earth for everybody, just with some personal examples from real life. For instance, I really enjoy my job. I started about 15 years ago, and I was moving from a job that I didn't like very much to my current job. And the first couple of years in the job, it was like floating on air, because the transition between a crappy job to this one was profound. So profound that I didn't even think about the weekend. I just loved being in my job. Now, it hasn't changed all that much, but 15 years later, I don't feel the same kind of enthusiasm for it that I did in the beginning, because I've got used to it. I haven't experienced the contrast to it, except for 15 years ago, which is now a memory that is growing ever more distant. Same kind of thing happened to me when I moved into this house. I was moving from a neighbourhood that I didn't like back to my childhood neighbourhood, which I had such fond memories of, and all the cycling routes that I had around the countryside. Suddenly I was back to this, and I hadn't experienced it in years, and it was like heaven on earth. Now, 8 years later, I've got used to it. It's not heaven on earth anymore. So you get used to things. So the problem with the idea of heaven is that it's stasis. It's the same thing forever. It's a life devoid of, it's an afterlife devoid of conflict and adventure and all the things that give color to life. That's the problem. I'm reminded of that line in The Matrix where, do you remember when Morpheus was taken prisoner by Agent Smith, and Agent Smith explained to him that they had made a previous version of The Matrix where everything was perfect, and it didn't work. It was a complete failure. Nobody bought it. The Wachowski brothers, they were onto something with that, and there is a kind of an esoteric side to the Matrix, and they were onto something with that. There's a sense in which we're built for conflict and adversity, and even though we like a peaceful, quiet life, notice the kind of entertainments that we occupy our spare time with. We're always watching television dramas and movies that are full of conflict. And we don't enjoy them unless they've got conflict. So maybe it's kind of like when your life becomes too placid and peaceful, you kind of have to find a way to sublimate those urges within you that are towards aggression. I think there's something to that. A life without adventure, where it's just bliss forever. How could that not get utterly boring to the point of torture? Now, it might be fine for a while, but imagine you've been in that state for a trillion years. So you've got this tiny little fragmented memory of a time on Earth when it's in this state, followed by trillions and trillions and trillions of years of bliss. Functionless, pointless, flat bliss. So, the Christian might say to me, well, you haven't got experience of this, so you really can't say what it would be like. Well, I do have experience of what life is like, and I know what makes sense to me and what I like about life and what I don't like. So if you're telling me that no matter what, I would enjoy that kind of bliss, then I would not be me. I would be someone other than me. The translation from here to there would be so great that I would be a different person if I would be enjoying that for trillions of years. So, no, that objection doesn't quite hold. I'm also reminded of that scene in Dawn of the Dead, the old Dawn of the Dead from the 70s, where the survivors managed to hole up in they took control of the shopping mall. They got all the zombies outside, and they set up house in there, and they were completely insulated from what was going on with the undead hordes ravaging the world outside. Completely insulated. They had all the supplies and entertainments that they needed for the rest of their lives, perhaps. They had it made, but they were completely without purpose. Their lives were just stagnating. And at one point, the character Fran, she just goes, what have we done to ourselves? Life is supposed to be vital. We have this strange contradiction within us, in that we want peace, we want tranquility, we want bliss, but then we don't. I mean, I would say that I have touched the outer edge of whatever it is that underlies perceivable reality. And there is this undercurrent of unity and love and bliss underneath all this that I experienced one time as a Christian. And it was a really profound experience. But do I want to live my life there? No, because to do that is to not have a life. Because you wouldn't concern yourself with anything that's going on here. You'd just be blissed out forever. So the real reason also that we invent afterlives for ourselves is because we haven't come to terms with our own mortality. And when you do come to terms with it, you actually don't need to believe in an afterlife at all. And to a large extent, I have come to terms with it. And I've done so by really examining what we mean by the idea of self, or psyche, or soul, or just this whole idea that this is an entity. But it's not. There's no such thing as entity, not really. Consciousness is not a thing in itself. It's a process. The version of me that existed when I was 3 years old is not the same as the version of me that exists now, aged 42. Turned 42 yesterday, actually. Oh, sorry, it's the 25th. 2 days ago. So, imagine that little 3-year-old me would have said to himself, I want to go to heaven when I die. Here's a 42-year-old version of me that can also say, I want to go to heaven when I die. But who's going to be in heaven? The 3-year-old or the 42-year-old? Or the 70-year-old version of me that's going to happen later, hopefully? Because they're all different people, really. I can't even remember the 3-year-old version of me at all. He no longer exists. His existence was transient. He became me. I will become someone else when most of the memories of the 42-year-old me have withered and died, just like the memories of the 3-year-old me have withered and died. There's no thing here. There's just the process of consciousness, the same process that is going on within you. We just tend to have this over-attachment to a set of habits and memories that we call a personality. But that personality changes all through life, and those memories are always leaking out of you as you move through life and make new ones. So there's nothing about you, even right now, that has any permanence. You just feel attached to it, but later you won't. So just take that understanding a little bit further and accept the fact that there's nothing permanent about you. There doesn't need to be. And there doesn't need to be any fear of what it will be like after death, because the cessation of consciousness is not a feeling. It's not a state of mind. So I've come to the realization that since there is no me, since there is only consciousness in various states, whether they're in me, in you, in somebody else, I define that as me, not the individual organism as me. I am consciousness itself in all the states, in the 3-year-old me, in the present you, in the 10-year-old you, in the 50-year-old you, in the 60-year-old me. It's all just consciousness in flux, totally impermanent. And when you really take that on board at a deep level, there is no need to make this survive death. So no, the answer is no. I don't desire to go to the Christian afterlife or any other life, because I have no need to make this organism last forever. I understand that in a much deeper sense, I, the only true I, never really dies, because it's the universe itself. My question for the next round on the Dark Wheel is, does religion have a role to play in mankind's future?